who has been on kingdom lists and Amtgard lists in general, right? Everyone is talking about skill gaps right now, right? I'm sure everyone has heard about how, like, Texas and that area has all of the best fighters everywhere. We've had people talking about skill gaps between kingdoms geographically. We've been having people talk about skill gaps in terms of, like, biology, height, weight, gender, these kinds of things. We've had no less than 1 million threads on all of these things, and I've counted. And the answer seems to be the same. The answer seems to be, like, well, actually, people aren't even really posing the question as to, like, why does this exist? Like, a lot of people have theories, right? They're like, oh, I think that skill gaps are because Texas started 20 years earlier than us. I think that skill gaps exist between people because of things like height, weight, strength, that kind of stuff. But no one is really asking the question right now, how do we go about fixing these things? And kind of the funny part about this is that I had this theory, right? Warlords are very good fighters. We're very intuitive, creative people. We have the ability to take a very complex art and break it down and perform. But when it comes to passing on that information to a person who would be a trainer, we suck at that. We are hilariously bad at that, right? And no one seems to be answering this question of how do we make training effective, right? Because the answer is always put in more time, more discipline, but put in the right kind of time, because if you put in the wrong kind of time, it doesn't matter. And then suddenly people are anxious and like, oh my God, like if I practice in the wrong way, I'm gonna build bad habits and be locked forever into this hilarious bad fighting, like what was that movie, Kung Pao, where they trained the one student wrong, like as a joke, like as if that was something that could happen. So, like, I started reading about sports science voraciously because it suddenly occurred to me, I don't know why I was the first person that occurred to in 30 years, that if basketball coaches and players and football players and coaches and hockey and baseball, and they're all making millions and billions of dollars, I don't know why I was the first person that occurred to that maybe they fucking know what they're talking about, and we should look at some of that stuff and figure out what they're doing and how to bring it into our sport. Because whether you are a class gamer, whether you are a role player, if you pick up a stick and you fight, you are an athlete, right? So we needed to start looking at that science. So I started reading lots of books to try to figure this out. One of them was Higher, Faster, Stronger. It was talking about, that's the title, Higher, Faster, Stronger. I forget the author. And he was talking about how NBA teams train, right? And it's a lot different than how high school teams train. So who has played a high school sport? Okay, who's played a college sport? Who's played a professional sport? Right? So I want you guys who are high school sports players to think about how you train, right? Who played basketball? Anybody played basketball in high school? Soccer? Okay, so like soccer, for instance, did you do drills like, you did drills in soccer, right?
Yeah.
Would you say it was fair to say you did like maybe like 20 minutes of passing, 20 minutes of shooting, and a bunch of sprints for 20 minutes at a time? Did you do everything in kind of a discrete 10, 20 minute path, right? Like just individual drills. Did you scrimmage much?
Yeah, usually at the end of something.
How long?
Maybe half an hour or something. It's just at the end.
So like,
put the stuff
but it was in compartmented pieces, right? It was this drill, this drill, this drill, this drill. Scrimmage is an afterthought, right? Well, what this book had to say about NBA teams is they came up with this concept where basketball players will scrimmage, and then at a random interval they'll blow a whistle and do a drill for like a minute, you know, and then they'll blow a whistle and they go immediately back to scrimmaging again, right? And they kind of create this controlled chaos where the coaches have a plan for the $1 million salaries they make you bet your ass they have a plan, right? But the players don't know what that plan is, and they're constantly tasked with completely different things, like seemingly at random. And I don't know if you guys, does anybody know what the difference between professional sports and high school sports is? High school athletes,
7 figures.
What they do in professionals are really, really good. Yeah. Right. So we can take that training paradigm for us. I trained a guy named Spin who is from Texas, and he pioneered these block strike drills, right? And immediately we started repeating the same mistake that they did with high school sports and continue to do, is do segmented sets of drills at scrimmage. And this is kind of an inefficient way to do it. Like, it's not the right path. And there definitely has been some resistance towards drilling, and I want to kind of return to that bad habits notion. But one of the problems with drilling in Amtgard, right? Like, we knew of block strike, which practiced one or two specific things, and that was really it. So I'm sure that you guys may have heard like this idea that like maybe block strike creates some weaknesses, or this kind of drill creates some weaknesses, and creates like predictable fighters, creates people with bad habits, right? So the problem with that is that block strike is not complete on its own, and in addition, doing it an hour and a half of block strike at a time, like how I learned to do, is not the most efficient way to do this. So like the reason that that is the case is because there's really only certain people who are willing to do that, right? Do anybody know what the term for a person who will sit down and do an hour and a half of the same drill over and over again for the tiniest benefits? It's called a sociopath, right? Like, so essentially that level of success is restricted to the people who are willing to do that. And the rest of us are sane people who are kind of like, no, I don't think I can spend an hour and a half doing something really miserable for tiny like benefits, like squeeze blood from a stone. Like, I don't want to do that. But there's nothing wrong with that, is the thing. Like, the answer that you get from warlords a lot of time is tough it up, put in more time, 5 to 6 days a week for 10 years, which is a lie. It's far less than that. But there's also nothing wrong with structuring this so that we do less drills in total, and we do an activity that's more engaging. So that's the basic theory of intervals. So how can we get more out of the drills for less input on those drills? And in addition, in addition to wanting to create like a scenario where we learn a lot and a system where we learn a lot quickly, there's also a second thing that people really often ignore. So how many people have heard the rationale for like elective practice? There's really no one around me who's interested in training. Who's heard that before? Who's heard, man, there's really nobody to fight with. There's nobody interested in fighting, right? Who feels that that's a significant blocker? Yeah. Right? Well, here's the problem. One of the reasons that we had that skill gap is because the skills that are intrinsic to learning these things were presented in a format that's very boring and very dull and not very engaging. But the second problem is we totally miss the point a lot of the time, right? So we have this culture that we actually kind of start combating, right? So you have these warlords and sword knights on top that are like these bad motherfuckers. They're like, look at this, all ye nerds, bow down, put in 5 to 6 times a week for 10 years. Like, well, a lot of the times we don't understand that when we do that and we build ourselves up like that and present ourselves to each other, we're shitting when we eat, you know, which is not very appetizing and not very effective. So another part of intervals is it's basically acceptance of a certain truth, right? You can only rise as high as the system that's supporting you, right? So a lot of people are like, hey, there's no one good to fight around me. Well, okay, there's no one good around to fight you, so you're not going to fight. I mean, like that's a pretty bad reason to stop doing something that you want to do, right? Especially when you could take the time to create other fighters that are going to lift you up and invest time in training these partners so that you can stand higher. And a lot of the times people just say, well, you know, that's too hard, like I'm not going to do that. Or it doesn't even occur to them that that's something they could do, that you could take someone who's not that interested in fighting and present an interesting format and get them interested in fighting, and then you get to stand higher to do that. So not only do we leverage sports science when we do this, we also leverage a little bit of social science as well in terms of generating hype to get people into the method. We preach a lot of positivity here, right? So in the first favor that I want to ask of you guys, who's heard of the term bad habits in terms of fighting? Who's ever thought about, like, don't develop bad habits, I'm dying because of my bad habits? Okay, well, you guys are going to give me a little bit of an offering here, and you're going to take that word out of your vocabulary and you're just going to give it to me and then put it in my pocket, and then I'm going to throw it away in the trash where it belongs because it's just a bad concept. There are no bad habits, right? You're not going to, there's really, it's the wrong lens to look at this through. There's undeveloped territory, right? There's movement faults where you might like put your knee in the wrong position to be able to spring off of it. There's no bad habit that's going to lock you into bad fighting forever if you don't address it. You can't drive out the negatives, right? By focusing on it. Like, have anyone ever heard stop hunching? Like when people bend their back over and they're like, stop hunching, stop hunching, stop hunching, stop hunching. And you're thinking about hunching and you're trying to stop it because you're thinking about it, you start hunching anyway, right? So the other thing I want to preach to you guys about this is positivity is critical, right? You want to add good things. Don't worry about subtracting the bad things, because if you're focused on hunching, you're going to hunch. But if you're focused on keeping your spine erect and maintaining good form while you step forward, suddenly you stop hunching because you're focusing on the right thing. So, positivity, right? That's really critical. So, that's kind of the lead up to what we're talking about, and what you guys need to be thinking about is bring more good stuff in. Make training fun, make it engaging, and make it welcoming. Because if you keep it fun, you keep it positive, you can continually expand and raise your system, and you can stand higher, and there's not any way that you're going to build high-level fighting without doing those things. So, that's the intro, right? I'm going to teach you guys how to do that, and now we're going to talk about the structure. So, what is an interval, right? An interval is a super fun way of getting in lots of spars and lots of drills and keeping it fresh and keeping it positive, right? So there's two phases. Technically there's three. There's two phases. There's always a fighting phase and there's drilling phases, right? And the fighting phase is fairly simple. Since we're short on time, I'm not going to tell you everything about the psychology of why this stuff works so fast. Essentially, the lessons of the drills juxtaposed to fighting immediately takes the lessons from the drills and puts them into the context where they belong and creates a feedback loop. I'm not going to talk to you guys too much about the psychology behind it, because you know we're 40 minutes late to start, so you guys are just going to take my word on that. And I'm going to show you guys how to do it, and we're going to talk about it online when we start building this community, because this isn't a class on like how to do sweet shit. This is the start of building a community. Like we have SKBC coming up, right? The more of this kind of work that you guys put in prior to SKBC, the more you'll take home from it. So anyway, sorry about that tangent. The fighting phase, right? If you do intervals with 2 people, all you do is spar, right? If you do intervals with more than 2 people, we like to do a game called winners losers. Right? You guys played that? Who's played winners losers? Okay, so winners losers is like this. 2 people fight, you have a winner, you have a loser, you throw up your sign, like a W if you won, an L if you lost, you find somebody that matches your sign, and you fight that guy. In intervals, it's performed a little bit differently. In an interval, you need to find that next guy as fast as you possibly can, right? If you need to jog over to the guy that matches your sign, that's what you do. So like one of the things that you don't do during the fighting phase is you don't like discuss shots too much, right? You want to just take the shots that hit you, call dead when you call dead. If you can't figure it out, just say, oh yeah, okay, I'm dead, and then go and find the next guy, right? So I want you guys to keep that in mind. The fighting phase is winners, losers, and you're trying to decrease your fight turnaround time to get as many fights as you can. And that does not mean that you're fighting as fast as you can and trying to kill people as fast as you can. That just means no standing around. So some of the fights you'll take a little bit slower, like if you need to rest, you know, have all the time to finish the fight that you need. Obviously don't like run away the entire time, but in between those fights, you get the next guy as fast as you can. Does that make sense? We have lots of coaches here that are going to help you guys learn how to do this. We have a pretty big class. I'll show you guys who those coaches are when we start doing the drills. But we're going to start talking about the drill phase now, right? So what we do is, like I said before, intervals take that long fighting phase, and then we intersperse drills throughout that fighting phase, right? So an entire round is about 5 minutes, and you might have like between 1 to 2 to maybe 3 drills in that 5 minutes, and the rest of it is fighting. Now the challenge with the drills is we've built a pretty diverse vocabulary of the different kinds of drills that you need to do. So some of those names are block strike top quadrants, block strike chest on hip, ABA, CNC, counter lunge, counter walk, that kind of stuff, like ammo. So you guys will have to, as you're building this community in your park that are going to perform these intervals, you guys will have to learn that vocabulary. And we have a lot of those videos available for you guys. We'll make sure that you guys find them. But for this particular intervals that we're going to run, and we are going to run 2 stages worth of intervals, just 1 8. We're going to teach you guys block strike is top quadrants, block strike chest on hip, block strike arm off hip, ABA, BAB, and grind. So that's 6 drills, right? And that'll take you for the first 3 weeks of a starter pack of drills that I've written for you guys. So we're going to start talking about those drills at this point. So if I could get my instructors over here so you guys see who they are. So I brought many people from Crystal Groves that have performed a vast number of these drills. Regardless of where you guys stand in comparison to these guys in terms of fighting, these guys know the vocabulary, right? These guys are going to help you figure out how to perform those drills to the best of your ability. So I think we got it pretty close to a 1-to-1 instructor to student ratio, which is perfect, right? It's going to make it real easy for you guys to figure out these drills. So we're going to kind of, if you guys want to return back to school, they'll find you guys when we're breaking up into the drill phase when we're teaching this. So here's the thing about these drills, right? So when I had you guys give me bad habits out of your vocabulary, and I know that none of you will ever say that word again, the reason I'm telling you that is because this is not a class where I'm going to get into the minutia of your form. I'm not going to address the little things that you're doing wrong, because I think that that's counterproductive. Everybody has to spend time doing things wrong before you could do things right. You have to view fighting as this big water tower full of mistakes, right? And every shot that you throw wrong is one drop out of that water tower, right? So when you think about these drills, the drills are basically a sandbox for you to experiment a little bit about things like hand positioning. And what they do is they take a slice of combat and let you experiment within that particular slice of combat. Does that make sense? Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start talking about block strike top quadrants. So let me get my stick and my gloves.
Hey.
And give me Hobie.
Hi.
Fun. Yeah, Hobie.
So I'm not going to get into the minutia of how we're going to block. That's for you guys to figure out, and if you do enough intervals, you will figure it out on your own. Your subconscious mind is smart. We'll give you a couple of tips here and there when you're talking about this stuff, but we're going to resist the urge to overteach. So the block strike category of drills practices something called exchanging, and that's throwing shots at a 1-to-1 ratio. And essentially what we're doing here is when Hobie throws at me and I block, right? Basically, when you block strike, you're looking for the best target to throw back at, like the most open one. So when I throw back, he tries to block. So you see, he moved his hand over there, and now he's going to start thinking about, hey, where do I want to throw back? What's most open? Or what do I want to throw back at? How do I want to change things? So he throws back at me. And then I throw back at him, and then he throws back at me. I throw back at him, and he throws back at me. And we're only targeting top quadrants for this particular slice of block strike. So block strike is a category that refers to like 3 different drills, and we talk about the targets in that kind of second piece of the drill that we're talking about. So basically, if we have Hobie standing here, and we split him down the middle, and then right here at the sternum, at the base of the sternum, there's 4 sections, right? So top quadrants is this section up here, and this section up here. So we don't swing low at him. So we plant our foot, plant our front foot. We make sure that the shorter person, who I think is Hobie, or he might just be standing downhill and we're the same height, can reach my chest. And he throws, and I throw. And he throws, and I throw. And if you watch Karate Kid, it's a little like a kata with another person involved. And just some tips for you guys are, if you keep your hand extended while you're doing this, it becomes much easier to create defense. So you want to block with a hand that's far out. You want to make sure that you're not throwing at the same quadrant the entire time. Like for example, if I keep throwing back at Hobie's chest, it gets really easy for him to predict when I'm throwing back. So you don't want to continually repeat one quadrant. You want to throw at them both evenly. That makes sense? You're allowed to move your back foot, so go ahead and throw. So if I want to change the angle a little bit, my front foot is planted, but my back foot is allowed to switch like this. Just go back and forth. And when you guys do this with your instructor, I want you to go at about 50% speed, nice and slow, until you get used to the idea of it. And then you can move up to like 75. As you get a little bit better at it. Now, when you do this, I don't want you to worry too hard about making mistakes. Remember, you have a giant water tower full of mistakes that you absolutely have to make, right? You're not going to develop bad habits just because you did something wrong like 2 or 3 times. That makes sense? So, the instructors grab a student, start working through top quadrants block strike with them. Go ahead, spread out. Get it done. I'm going to come around and check on you guys. Okay, so that's block strike top quadrant.
Good stuff, very good.
Any combination of head and right on right, left on left, right on left, left on right. Doesn't matter, right? It's whatever you guys want to do. Before, when we used to train this, I used to make everybody do all 4 combinations, like right on right, left on left, you know, left on right, right on left. Right? But nowadays, it's whatever you want to work on, right? So maybe you come into an interval and you're like, hey, I want to work on my left hand. And you might do every set of block strike that we do with your left hand. Or if you're an earlier fighter and you're still trying to develop and you're not concerned with your offhand, you might just do the whole thing with your right. Or you might pass it back and forth evenly between the two. So a set of block strike, you guys just did much more than 1 set. A set of block strikes is about 20 to 30 seconds. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so I'm going to grab a sword from somewhere. Okay, so, Jerry, can you come over here, please? Sure. So, obviously we can't just fight 2 top quadrants, right? Because people are going to swing at your hips. They're going to swing at your body. The top quadrants forms the basis of most fighting because it's the first things that most people can reach, but we still have to be able to address lower quadrants when we're fighting. So, what we do is, we have 2 other kinds of block strike in addition to top quadrants. The next one that we're going to deal with is chest on hip, right? So, there are always 2 quadrants in block strike. If we split Jerry down the middle and right across the rib cage like this, we were doing top quadrants. Now we're going to do chest and on hip. So the on side is whatever side that the sword is on, right? And the off side is whatever side is not on that sword. Does that make sense? So, we do chest and on hip. And what that looks like, hopefully I find that eventually. What that looks like is this. So, Jerry swings up my chest, and I riposte back at Jerry's hip. And you notice when we go for these slow shots and when we block, we get just a tiny bit of knee flexion down here. You don't want to practice leaning forward like this, right? We want to just drop down a little bit. It makes it much easier. And then throw back. And throw. And you notice I'm not trying to hit him in his sword arm. I'm trying to hit him in that hip. So what you want to do is you want to think about your top quadrant shots. If this was boxing, they're your jabs, right? You hit them in the arm, you hit them in the hand, they're a little bit easier to block. Your low quadrant shots are kind of like your knockout punch, so we need to be able to practice those knockout punches. So, instructors grab a different student and go over chest and on hip. Go ahead. Okay.
It's going to be a matter of personal preference.
Chest on hip, right? Now, I realize that we're moving through these pretty quickly. Remember, this is your first time doing these drills. We're not terribly concerned about the quality of your shots and blocks. What we're concerned with is, do you understand the basic rules of it, right? Because that quality is going to come from you guys running intervals at home, right? It takes time to get good. So make sure, as long as you guys understand the rules of these drills, you're good. Because you're not going to, no one is going to get it right tonight. No one's going to get it right within the next 3 months. But after about 3 months, you're going to start being like, hey, I can do these shots, right? So the next one we're going to work on is arm and off hip. So arm and off hip, if I could get Thrash over here. We're splitting Thrash like Saw, the musical. And we moved from chest and on hip to arm and off hip, right? So we basically, if we start off with top quadrants with both of our top quadrants selected, we're just dropping down the other side. We're dropping down the off side, right? Now, when you do this one, this is the only drill where I think it's best to stand, if you guys imagine more or less it's really helpful to stand with this back leg forward, because a lot of the times, if I have this shot, this side forward, and he throws here, and I like duck in a weird way, a lot of the time you're gonna get hit in the groin. Like our affectionate name for this drill was ball busters back in the day when I was doing like 30 sets a day with my friends, right? So just for the sake of this drill, go ahead and put that back foot forward like this, because switching those hips like this helps protect that groin and keeps drilling fun. No one wants to get hit in the groin. So again, it's just the same basic thing. My target selection is Thrasher's arm, his sword arm, right? And his offside hip. So over here. Does that make sense? So show you what that looks like, girl. And you'll notice the knee flexion is still there. I'm giving myself just a tiny bit of a drop. We're not too concerned with quality. We're just making sure that we obey with the rules of the drill, trying to mix it up as best as we can, kind of hunting around and exploring for different ways of hitting these two targets like a nice little sandbox, right? That makes sense? Okay, instructors, pick a different student and show them arm off hip.
Some good blocks.
Okay, so it's looking like that's pretty well understood at this point, right? So the next one, obviously we can't like bank on the fact that our opponents are always gonna stand still for us, right? And just hunker down and block strike with us. So we need to start incorporating some level of footwork into this. And we're gonna do that first with ABA. ABA stands for attack, block, attack, right? So you need to remember that order is important because there's
Hey y'all, come on over to this side.
BAB, right? The second drill called BAB is just for block, attack,
Thank
block.
you.
So the letters refer to what the moving person in the drill is doing. So we're concerned with attack, block, attack. So if I could get Blaze over here, we're going to show you guys that. So attack, block, attack looks like this. Instead of throwing an infinite chain of shots and blocks, we do a more segmented approach where we attack, block, attack, and then reset. So right now we're practicing on our movement into the exchange zone where we're going to be able to throw with each other, because we don't, when we fight, we don't like tap in from right here and be like, ready, go! You know what I mean? This is not how we fight. We usually tap in, we hang out from here a little bit, and then we try to close and throw something, right? So we need to be able to practice that phase of combat. Block strike practices the phase of combat where we're already here, we're already close in, we're trying to just bang it out to figure out what's going on. ABA practices closing and beginning this engagement, okay? So ABA stands for attack, block, attack. So here's the basic pattern, right? This Blaze is going to be the lunger first. I'm going to be the stander. When we've completed the chain, our rules flip, right? So Blaze is the lunger, lunges in and throws. I throw back at him and he blocks. And then he attacks again. And then we reset. Let's just mutually take a step back, get a nice distance apart, and the roles switch. Now I will attack, block, and attack. So I step in and throw, he throws back, I throw back. Then we reset. And he goes in. Then I come in, attack, block, attack. He lunges in, attacks, blocks, and attacks. Does that make sense? So, when you do this, there's a couple of key pointers. This isn't a lunge drill where you're trying to learn how to lunge as far as humanly possible, right? That's not going to work. It can be a small step, a short step, it can be a medium. If you want to practice long, do long, right? But don't think just because it's a drill where you lunge in that lunge needs to be the best lunge on the frickin' world, right? And it doesn't even have to be straight at it. Like if I want to come off a little bit offline this way, I'm allowed to do that. The basic theory of it is we're starting from out of reach. Okay, we can let that joke go on a bit longer. I step in and throw, goes back, and I throw back. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so remember when you're doing this, it's a little cold, you You guys are really tired probably from Phoenix League. It's a little bit slippery. So I want you guys to take a nice kind of controlled step while you do this. And don't burn yourselves out because we're gonna get super fucking burnt out when we do an actual interval, when we get through this and one more drill. Okay, cool? Okay, instructors, find a new person. Attack, block, attack. ABA.
Oh, this guy attacked.
All right, bring it back in. Bring it back in. Bring it back in.
No, seriously.
All right, so what you guys are going to notice is that this is significantly harder, right? Whereas block strike is kind of a binary operation of I'm either throwing it the right thing or blocking. ABA is kind of a longer chain of actions, right? So what you guys will notice is some of the time you might mess up the rhythm of the drill. I'll tell you that is totally acceptable. We'll eventually start introducing drills where you, not today, but you guys will start teaching yourselves drills where you're supposed to throw at the same time as each other, and that will be very difficult too. So I don't want you guys to feel like you're doing something wrong if you accidentally mess up the rhythm of the drill, if you accidentally throw twice in a row, or forget to throw the last time or something like that. Mistakes are cool. Remember, you have a huge wall of mistakes that you have to make before you get to the bottom of the well that has the quality fights, right? So don't worry about it. The next drill we're going to work on is BAB. It's block, attack, block, right? And instead of a lunger, we have a walker. So Deanna's going to help me demonstrate this one, right? So the purpose of BAB is we want to basically be able to walk into a fight, and when they throw at us, we want to be able to snap into our stance suddenly, right? So going from this neutral kind of lackadaisical position into a position that's ready to fight. So, and it also functions during the intervals as kind of a very similar rhythm to ABA, but BAB allows you to have kind of an active rest where you're not like pushing yourself super, super hard. So it's not quite as common in terms of its use, but it still forms a very valuable drill to add into the intervals. So this is BAB, it's block, attack, block. So I'm walking initially, right? I remember that the letters of those, the letters refer to the actions that the moving person is undertaking. So I walk in towards Deanna, and when Deanna can reach me, she throws, I block, I attack, I block again. We back up, she walks forward, Deanna blocks, attacks, and blocks. So we're just gonna do a couple passes back and forth at like 50% speed. So go ahead and walk towards me. It's my turn to walk. Dan's turn. That makes sense to you guys? Instructors, grab another student. BAB. We're going to talk about a couple of concepts before we do our very first stage of our very first interval. When we run intervals, we do 2 stages, and they're both about 20 minutes to half an hour long, right? So you guys are going to be doing 20 minutes of work for me as soon as I'm done giving you just a couple more pieces of information, right? So we do a single sword stage, which is what you guys are looking to do now. And then we do a combination stage, which you guys are going to learn after we go over just a couple more drills. It's 3 more, and they're very similar to the ones you've already done. So that's only going to take like 10 minutes to get you guys through those drills, okay? So here's the basic rules of thumb, right? We're going to run this suite in, and there's going to be fight phase where you guys are going to play winners, losers, right? When you find your next fight as fast as you can, do not argue about shot taking. Just take the things that hit you with 0 expectation that the other guy's going to take his shots. You're not here to win. And anybody tracking their kill-death ratio or even thinking about it is missing the point. You guys are going to focus on the task at hand. Because the task at hand is completing the drills properly and putting the lessons you learned from the drills into the fights as they pop up, right? That's what's going to make you guys do well in tournaments. That's what's going to make you guys do well in Phoenix League, where you can take people on as Florentine Warriors, right? So here we're just here to do work. That makes sense? So remember, since you're minimizing time between fights, you guys are going to be using a lot of cardio. Now, the guys that have been doing this a while are just pretty well conditioned from doing this for a year. They also have some strategies that they're using, and we're going to talk about those strategies for just a couple of minutes before we start doing this, right? So here's a note about cardio. You want to keep yourself pretty tired. That is a feature. That is not a bug in the program, right? So the effort, what the effort does is it strips you of your physical power. So if you're tall, if you're strong, if you're flat, if you're fleet-footed, if you have fast hands, the act of being tired takes those things away from you, right? So last year I was doing all kinds of plyometrics and I could lunge like 12 or 14 feet, right? Most people can't physically match that. Well, that isn't just an advantage. That's a huge disadvantage when I'm fighting because those physical powers allow me to win a lot of fights without being very technical, right? So if you're tired, you have to focus on technique. So you want to keep yourself pretty tired, like you're doing a pretty quick jog, right? You should be out of breath through the whole thing. Not winded, but you should be breathing hard enough that you can't say more than like a sentence in a row, right? Like if you can get through a couple of sentences, you're probably not working hard enough. That said, you don't want to go for broke and totally wind yourself and fall on the ground screaming. Like this is not Dragon Ball Z, all right? If you guys beat your own asses and they can't get back up, you're still missing experience. This isn't anime, it's sports science, right? Don't go to that point of no return, right? You guys will build up as you're doing this, so if this one seems really hard, you're thinking, I can't do this. That's pretty much everyone's story that started out doing this. Is like, oh shit, I can't do this. I can't get through a whole interval. If you have to take a break, take a break. And there's another strategy to think about, is you can take some of the fights easy and play defense so that you have a moment to catch a few breaths. That's allowed, right? And that's a tactic that I use a lot. You don't want to play too aggressive. One of the cues that make people really understand the idea that your cardiovascular endurance is a resource that you have to spend, and you slowly regenerate it over time. And what does that sound like? That sounds like mana from Diablo, right? So that's how you have to think of your cardiovascular endurance. It's MP that you spend, and you get a little bit back at a time. And have you ever fought a boss in Final Fantasy with no MP and no elixirs? Because we don't have elixirs, all we've got is propel, and it's only like 5 MP tops, right? So you have to conserve that, right? And the last thing we're going to talk about, also, this really, have you guys done Warlord sports style tournaments with the pits? I'll tell you what, the people that have done that style of tournament, that do this style of training, it is no longer exhausting to them because this is much harder. We essentially overbuild our engine and we underrun it. And in addition, if you feel like you're a fighter that struggles with anxiety and self-confidence, doing this kind of work builds a lot of courage, right? It builds the courage to keep continuing when you think you don't have anything left to go. And that courage is essentially a muscle, like it builds up over time. I'm going to give you guys a couple of tips on attitude, right? Because attitude is critical. Remember, while we're doing this very difficult work, we have to maintain a positive outlook, and we have to make sure that everyone is having fun, or we risk harming our system and eliminating our own ability to rise if we're not really good to other people. So here's some good tips for you guys, right? You get out of intervals what you put into it, right? If you just cruise through it without thinking too hard about the drills, you do gain a fair amount, but not as much as if you focus on making sure that the drills are working for you, that you understand what you're doing, and you're using the drills as a little sandbox to explore that phase of combat, right? If that's too hard to think about too much at once like that, just keep doing it and just go ahead and cruise through it. But remember, keep your thoughts in the process. Try to be active in the process. Keep an open mind to what's going on, right? One thing you hear a lot of times is you'll hear comments like, oh, that person is just reaction fighting. Has anyone ever heard that one before? Just reaction fighting, or that guy's just doing this to win. That guy's just doing the simple thing. I have a really simple rule, is if you're dead, you've got nothing to complain about, because dead people don't complain, they mostly just rot, right? There's nothing wrong with being dead, but if someone kills you with something, just say good, because that's what it is. They just provided you with good information that's gonna help you fill a hole in your game. They just did you a favor, right? So if you find yourself getting frustrated because you're dying to things, there's this feedback loop where your thoughts control your speech, which control your actions, right? And you can break up that cycle at any point. So if you just change your speech, you'll find that speech is changing your thoughts, right? Which will change your actions, and you'll stop getting frustrated. So when somebody kills you, say good. If someone kills you with something zany, like a spin shot, or something between the legs with like a devil's hook, like, that's awesome. You know, that's exactly what we want. This isn't like some kind of lockstep regimen when we're building an army. Creativity has a place here, right? So get into other people's fighting. Be encouraging. Be positive. We're talking about taking shots again. Just make sure you call them as quickly as possible with zero expectation that the other guy's going to take their shots. Remember, you're not here to win fights. You're here to collect information. And also, if you think you got hit, just take it, right? If someone gets a shot with you and you catch like 90% of it, but 10% of it hits you, first of all, that's still valid. Second off, not taking that shot, it's again like playing an RPG, fighting a random battle, but when the experience pops up at the end of the battle after you've won it, just say no thanks to the experience points, right? So always take that shots, take the little things, take the graces, because it's presenting you with information, right? And I will tell you right now, you guys are gonna get really tired. So mistakes are definitely gonna happen. People are gonna miss stuff. If someone blows something off, just move on and get your next experience points. That makes sense? There's going to be breaks in between each phase of fights, right? You guys are going to drink water on all of those breaks, even if you're not thirsty, because you will be. Just take a quick sip and then come back out. That's about every 5 minutes or so. And the last thing that seems to really help people out is focus on the task at hand. One bad habit is getting really frustrated when you're not doing well. And sitting there and saying to yourself, don't get frustrated, don't get frustrated, don't get frustrated. I don't sound like a happy person, right? I'm gonna get frustrated. But if you focus on the task at hand, the thing you're supposed to be doing right now, it crowds out all of those negative thoughts. It just pushes them out with the thing that you have to do. And then suddenly you're through a whole interval and you've completed a really good practice, right? So you focus on the task at hand, whether that's finding your next fight, fighting, drilling, getting a drink of water. Concentrate, focus on the task at hand, and if you do that, the result takes care of itself. So when you guys break down and do this, the instructors are going to guide you through this activity. During the drill phase, you have to find the next guy really fast, right, that you're going to do that drill with, right? Find him as fast as you can, because you only get about 30 seconds to do a drill. If you forget how to do something, that's cool, because it's going to happen. You guys just learned 5 different drills, and you're going to learn a couple more, right? And you're also going to have to be able to recreate this model at home, right? When you go home and you're running your own intervals and you want to expand from 2 to 3 to 4 and 5 and 6 people, you will become the teacher of these drills, right? You will become the ones responsible for teaching people who don't know how to do this. So make sure you guys pay attention to how the instructors are coaching you on this, because as soon as you complete a couple of these hits, you're going to have to become coaches too. Does that make sense? All right, let's fire it up. And everyone else has experienced this with you. So it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter how good they are, as long as they come and fight, they bring a stone to the mountain, and that stone drives the mountain higher, right? So you guys need to make sure that you're always thinking about not just like, not just how you're treating the people that usually do ints, right? We call them ints. I don't know if I should have yet. Probably. It's part of the vernacular. That's not just the people who do it. That means continually reaching out to people and testing the waters and trying to get more people to do the intervals with you, right? Because the more fighters we have, like, they don't have to be as good as you. They don't even have to be close. They just have to want to pick up a sword and just sweat with you. That will make you better. Every person that comes, they bring their own shots, their own spin on combat, and the more information you take in, the better you get. So you need as many people as possible to train with you, right? You need to be a good salesman. You need to be a good steward of fighting. You need to find the people that are kind of dipping their toe in the water. Because there's like a lot of old shit, right? About like the stick jock culture and the fighting culture not being very inclusive. You gotta fix that. You gotta stop, like, and not you guys, because you guys are out here sweating real hard with us. We gotta work to fix that shit where you eat culture. You know what I mean? We gotta keep bringing people in. Embrace your positivity. Keep people welcome. It keeps people learning. Remember, we need to talk about like smack talk, right? That's kind of a beloved Amtgard pastime. But we really need to kind of push that to the wayside, because while me and Thrash might go back and forth, right, and kind of tease each other a little bit, Thrash might be totally okay with it. But what if Blaze is watching, and Blaze isn't okay with how I'm talking to Thrash, right? What if Blaze doesn't understand it? You know, that's just part of how me and Thrash come along. So you kind of have to treat it like a business, right? You have to be professional, you have to be positive, because you don't know who you're turning off, right? You don't know who you might be like offending. You might not know like who you might be intimidating when you talk that way, right? And the other part of it is like sometimes people are like, well, this is who I am, you know. I like to have an aggressive, politically incorrect sense of humor, you know, but that's you, right? That's you on your private time. Intervals need to be about the culture, right? They need to be about everyone getting involved. So like, if you like that politically incorrect sense of teasing humor, that kind of brutal camaraderie, you know, the problem with it is, like, it just doesn't help you with this particular goal. So no judgment. Like, if you like that kind of humor, that's cool, man. But you just can't bring it here because you're shitting where you eat. You know, I mean, you got to be careful about that stuff. Another really important lesson, and I want you guys to, well, actually there's two, but I want you to take this one first. Don't, if you're an experienced fighter and you're bringing in new fighters, right, don't overteach. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to give people less information as opposed to more. But you can only really work on one piece of fighting at a time. And fighting is kind of the process of doing a lot of things correctly at once, right? And you can only really build one thing at a time. So if you give someone the most important point that they need to be working on, that's all they can do. And the rest that you say is kind of for yourself. And you guys will notice that I modeled this for you when I said, just do the drill by the instructions, right? Because I'm not going to sit here and try to get top quadrants perfect, because that would take all night. And then you guys would miss like 5 other drills and all of the ends, right? Trust the people, trust your learners, right? Trust the people that are jumping in to kind of just holistically absorb it. It's like learning language, right? Your mom and your dad didn't sit there and tell you what the word and means, or the, or to, or is, right? You just kind of started to understand that just by experiencing the culture holistically. That's what intervals do for you guys, right? So if you give someone advice, make sure it's welcome, make sure it's mutual. Typically you want to keep it if they ask for it, or if you know that they look up to you. Otherwise, just do the instructions with them, because you never know what someone else is targeting, and they never see what someone else is working in on, right? Like there's a common bodybuilding gym rule, right? Where you never critique someone's workout, because you don't know if this dude is really just trying to hammer his glutes or not. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a stupid way of squatting. Like, you don't know what they're doing, right? So just trust the people to learn, right? People are smart. Your subconscious mind is smart. Just working through these drills and doing these intervals will do more for you than you think. That makes sense? Don't overteach. When you overteach, you're really just saying it for yourself. And intervals is about the other guy. And raising that other guy, that's what's going to raise you without even trying. That makes sense? All right, so you need a second piece of equipment, and we're going to blow through these drills.
Woo! Woo! Yeah, combos!
Talk about it. So you need a shield or a second sword. Down spear's okay.
Yikes.
I did this lefty. This is wrong. My shield goes on this hand. I've been fighting for a long time. I know what
Guys, gotta move fast, because these lights go off at 11. I know you guys are probably pretty beat, but
we're gonna be
this is the only chance we get. So where's my sword? Where's my sword?
Come fast, Tato.
Okay, so the next drill we're going to talk about is grind, right? And the nice thing about the grind drill is it's basically just block strike, but it's actually way easier, right? So Elra's going to come and demonstrate grind with me. So when we were trying to come up with a drill that helped us out with combinations, we tried to limit it the same way that we do block strike with a single sword, but it didn't work because it's too easy, right? So the grind drill is really just block strike with a second piece of equipment. No target restrictions, right? Obviously, we don't want to chop people in the calves because that's not as technical as trying to hit them in the hip. But we just hang out, block strike, all 4 quadrants are available to you, right? It's that same 1-to-1 rhythm. So Elra throws, I throw. She throws, I throw. And like Elra has correctly demonstrated, you're allowed to move around a little bit. We don't necessarily need to pin that front foot down. We can circle a little bit with smaller steps if we want to. That's good. But you're keeping in the same general vicinity. Does that make sense? Okay, match up with the instructor, and you have a second instruction. Go 50% speed. This is an active rest. We'll go full of speed or 75% speed when we're hitting the second in. You guys have just a couple of minutes. Get with your instructor. Everybody good? Yeah. All right, the next one, you guys already know the next 2 drills, right? ABA. So Nate's gonna come over here. Remember, just like single sword ABA, but we're doing it with that second piece of equipment. So we're gonna go through this one real quick because you guys already know the instruction. There's really no changes. However, if you're using something like a down spear, you need to keep in mind that if you try to attack them from out here, like, come here. So like if he lunges in and pokes me with a down spear at max range and I'm standing, I have to and am allowed to step forward after he makes contact with my equipment, right? That's how you handle that contingency. So we're just going to go through it real quick, show you what that looks like, and we'll break it down with the next instructor. Go ahead, watch. And then we switch roles. You'll notice we're using more side-to-side movement now, and we're allowed to get a little bit closer to our opponent when we lunge in. Any questions on that one? That makes sense. Real easy. Match up with an instructor if you can find one. Pair up, and try it. Just go through real slow, small steps.
Heck yeah.
Bring it back in. One more. One more drill. The thrash, come in. The next one's BAB. Guys already learned this one too. Same exception with the down spear plus, right? Just make sure you're within reach of that other opponent, and when someone makes contact with your equipment, you're allowed to move. So, Thrash, we're going to demonstrate BAB real quick. Just real simple. Remember, 50% speed. Thrash walks in, I throw, he throws, I throw. Change positions. I walk in, he throws, I throws, he throws. Walk in. Questions? Same thing. Get to it.
All right,
Keep it
new
50%
person.
speed. I'll give you a couple minutes to drink, and then we'll hit the last leg and we'll be done. Anybody need more time? It's pretty simple, right? Yep. Okay.
You did great.
Everybody take 3 minutes. Get a drink, and we're going to do the last in. And then we're done. If you guys have made it through your first interval, I'm very impressed. You guys played hard today.
But you have to stay for your intervals picture.
Yes. Yeah, we'll definitely need somebody to take that. Most important part of it as well.
They don't, the games don't count if there's no
3
picture.
minutes on the clock.
Oh, it didn't happen.
Or we could just go when it says to go.
Leg on death.
Yeah. Oh, hey guys, one more thing. I forgot to mention this. It was my mistake. When we do intervals, we play leg on death. That means you only take a leg shot when it would have killed you. What that does is it reduces the stress on your knees, and you don't burn your energy doing tons of squats and lunges, getting up and down. That makes sense? We try to keep it easy for ourselves. In addition, this is optional, but this is what I do. To keep my fight turnaround high, when I get hit in the arm, when I'm using sword and board, you typically call dead, so I don't have to waste my time strapping out. My rationale is, I already did the single sword interval earlier. I want to practice board. That makes sense? Yes. That's optional. If you want to practice single sword against board, that's on you. If you're on Florentine and you don't want to drop one sword, you can call it dead. You can call it dead whenever you want. That makes sense? So, just an option. Just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that you could do it. That cool? Gosh. Guys, doing great. Let's finish this up. Then let's have some bourbon.